Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I am doing a book review on Feast, A History of Grand Eating by Roy Strong. This is a non-fiction book about food, but specifically about banquets and feasts and how they came about in the sense that we know them. The book starts back in ancient Greece and Rome, where people lounged around on not quite couches, but you know, the one-sided couches kind of thing, lounged around on furniture like that and ate, because apparently that was really good for your digestion. However, throughout the entire book, he also talks about classism and how food and all of this grand eating depended very much so on what you could afford or what your class was, which plays into what you can afford, obviously. But once you got up into the higher ranks, like queen, king, baron, baroness, senator, whatever, depending on the time period, it meant that you could either wear certain colors or clothes, you could eat certain things, regardless of whether you could afford them, and it also meant that you could sit on certain types of chairs, at certain tables, what have you. For example, in medieval times, there was a hierarchy of chairs, of all things. So the monarchs got the chairs with the arms, you know, rest your elbows on it. And then if you were not a monarch, like a prince or a princess, you got a chair with a back, which the monarchs also had. But as a prince or a princess, you did not get any arms. And it went all the way down, basically taking away bits and pieces of the chairs until you got down to a lowly stool, which, lowly, I mean, you're still titled and rich, but you have to sit on a stool and support yourself because you don't have a back or arms on the chair. That aspect of this was absolutely fascinating, and I apologize if there's any glare on this, I can't tell. But I thought it was fascinating to look at how classism affected all of these manners of eating and what that meant. He also discussed cookbooks, or cookery books, as he puts it, throughout the time. For example, they don't really start popping up until the Renaissance, really. But even then, they're fairly few and far between, and they're just reiterating what they already know. What they knew, that is, was that Galen's theory of the humors, 4 of them, was correct and valid, and that meant that depending on your constitution, for example, a man has a very, heavy and hot burning constitution, I think it was, so he could eat the really tough foods first. For example, meat. So he would eat the meats first, and then work his way up to the lighter foods like fruit or salad, which are rabbit foods, and nobility doesn't eat those anyway, but not the point. And it really depended on your constitution, for one, and then the humors that were in balance. We recognize this as a ridiculous theory today, but I think Strong did a really good job explaining it and explaining how that affected what people ate and when. He also explained the schedule of eating, which was fascinating. Having read Ruth Goodman's How to Be a Tutor, which is a dawn to dusk guide of how to be a tutor in about the middle classes, a little bit lower, this was a really good companion book, I think, because it went through the entire history of eating from, like I said, ancient Greece and Rome up until about, well, technically it goes through World War II, but realistically it doesn't in depth properly go more than about 1900. Which is fair, because once the wars come, big fancy banquets aren't things anymore that people do. If we want to show off our wealth and our power, which is essentially what people were doing with these big banquets, or feasts, because they are 2 different things, we do it in what we buy. We get the flashy car. By the way, did you see the most expensive car sold for, what, $18 million or something? Crazy. Or the big computers that cost, you know, $30,000. Is there a computer that costs $30,000? Because I sincerely hope not, but that's not the point either. We show our money very differently now than we did, and in part because of World Wars I and II, and the rationing that happened in those. Fun fact, Great Britain was on rations until 1954 officially. I did not know that. I thought they ended in like 1950. Nope. Back on track though. That is my one complaint with this book, is that I wish it had gone through more of sort of the downfall of feasting and fancy eating in World War I and II. I think it did a gloss over job with World Wars I and II and the death of fancy eating, because it basically got to the last chapter. It's a postscript and it says the eclipse of the table, and it is exactly 3 pages and talks about Edward VII's coronation banquet in August 1902. And that's all we get, is 3 pages covering an entire century. That seemed very rushed to me, even if, as I recognize, it's hard to look at history from such a close perspective. Granted, 100 years seems like a long time, but realistically it's not. Humans have been around for a long, long time, thousands of years, and the planet's been around a lot longer than that, so 100 years is the blink of an eye. And I get that it's hard to look at something that close, but at the same time I did want a little bit more, even just to go up until 1940 and then mention the rationing and how banquets couldn't have been given because Great Britain specifically was worried about being bombed, and Germany was starving and putting people in concentration camps, and everybody else was invaded or worried about not making it across the ocean because we have U-boats. It's a really bad time. Anyway, like I said, that was my one complaint, just that the ending felt very rushed. However, the rest of the book was fantastic. I think I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 because that ending part really did throw me off a bit. My other favorite bit about this is all of these pictures. This one is a royal banquet in late 14th century. He's got a couple leaves in here, so let me see if I can find one of those, where it covers both pages. And of course I wouldn't be able to find one because that would be entirely too simple. Oh, maybe. That's not a leaf. But he has all of these pictures throughout the entire book. Some of them take up an entire page, like this one. Some of them are just part of a page, like this one. Or the first one I showed you. And they go, like I said, they go through the entire thing and he explains them. So, for example, this one, which has a dog that looks like a fish, and I still can't explain that. This one has a picture of all of these different types of foods. Also, peacocks being plucked, cooked, and then re-feathered is just my favorite thing. I don't know why, I can't explain it, but I think it's hilarious and also beautiful and incredibly hard to pluck a bird, whether it be a swan, a peacock, what have you, cook said bird properly without the technology that we have today, and then reconstitute the bird and decorate it with, you know, gold foil on their beak or painting their feathers to make sure they're pretty enough for the king because you do not want to piss a monarch off, and then serving it. They were so incredibly elaborate and it is beautiful. This book also did a really good job describing those, and a lot of the pictures help to set the image of these feasts and these banquets in your mind. This was a fantastic book. I highly enjoyed it. If you are at all interested in food or history and you don't really know where to start, this is a great place to start for either food or banquets of any sort. It looks at so many different places and describes so many things and makes just small little references in it to future people or things that you know that wouldn't have been at the time. It's fantastic and I highly recommend it. So that is my book review for Feast, A History of Grand Eating. I hope you enjoyed it and I will see you in my next video. Bye.